Most people don't stay broke because they are stupid. They stay broke because they're emotional. They make smart plans and then panic. They set clear goals and then sabotage them the moment discomfort appears. They understand money logically, but live it emotionally. And that silent war between your emotions and your money is why so many intelligent people never escape financial stress. This audiobook is about that war, because in this audiobook, Emotions versus Money, Why Smart People Stay Broke, inspired by the core idea behind your brain is broke, you're going to uncover something uncomfortable but freeing. Money problems are rarely money problems. They are emotional regulation problems wearing financial disguises. And once you see that, everything changes. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. You don't lose money because you don't know better. You lose money because you feel before you think. You spend to soothe. You avoid to escape discomfort. You delay to protect your ego. You overreact to short-term fear and underreact to long-term consequences. Your brain is not broken because you're weak. Your brain is broken because it evolved to survive danger, not manage money. And money triggers survival instincts: fear, scarcity, status anxiety, comparison, impulse. In this audiobook, we are not going to hype you up. We are not going to promise shortcuts. We are not going to sell you motivation. We are going to retrain how your brain responds to money. You'll learn why emotions sabotage smart people financially, how your nervous system hijacks your wallet, why discipline fails when emotions aren't addressed, how to build emotional systems that protect money automatically, and how to think clearly about money even when you don't feel calm. This is not financial advice. This is psychological clarity. And clarity lasts longer than motivation. Here's the punchline you need to hear early. If you don't control your emotions, money will never obey you. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. Why Intelligence Doesn't Save You from Financial Self-Sabotage. Some of the smartest people you know are drowning financially. They read books. They understand compound interest. They can explain investing strategies. They know what they should do, and yet they don't do it. Meanwhile, someone less informed, less articulate, less smart builds stability slowly and steadily. This isn't about intelligence. It's about emotional control. Smart people often trust their thinking too much and underestimate how often emotion quietly overrides it. You think you're making a decision, but most of the time, you're justifying an emotional reaction. You don't decide to overspend. You relieve stress. You don't choose to avoid your finances. You avoid anxiety. You don't change your plan. You escape discomfort. Money becomes the emotional pressure valve of your life. Bad day? Spend? Feeling behind? Compare? Feeling powerless? Impulse buy? Feeling bored? Chase excitement. And because you're smart, you can always explain it afterward. That's the dangerous part. Smart people are excellent at rationalizing emotional behavior. And rationalization feels like control. But it isn't. Control happens before the emotion acts, not after you explain it. This is why willpower fails. Willpower fights emotion head-on. Systems prevent emotion from deciding. And until your money is protected from your moods, your intelligence is irrelevant. Chapter 2. Your brain was not designed for modern money. Your brain evolved to survive immediate threats, not monthly budgets, not long-term investing, not delayed gratification across decades. Your nervous system doesn't understand retirement. It understands danger now. That's why money feels personal. That's why numbers trigger fear. That's why losses hurt more than gains feel good. This isn't weakness, it's biology. When money feels uncertain, your brain activates survival mode. Survival mode doesn't plan, it reacts. It chooses relief over logic, certainty over strategy, now over later. And modern money constantly pokes that system. Notifications, bills, comparisons, social pressure, status signaling. Your emotions are constantly stimulated, and your wallet pays the price. This is why telling people to just be disciplined doesn't work. You don't discipline emotions. You design around them. And once you understand that, once you stop blaming yourself and start understanding yourself, you gain leverage. Because the goal is not to feel nothing. The goal is to stop letting feelings make financial decisions. In the next chapter, we're going to expose the most expensive emotion of all, the one that quietly ruins more financial plans than any other. And once you see it, you'll never unsee it. Dear viewer, we strive to create high-quality videos for you. Please assist us in improving our efforts by commenting on what you like about the video and what you would change or add. We would be very grateful. Chapter 3. Fear. The emotion that quietly controls your wallet. Fear is not loud at first. It doesn't scream. It whispers. What if this doesn't work? What if you need this money later? What if you fall behind? What if you make the wrong move? Fear doesn't usually stop you from earning. It stops you from committing. Smart people are especially vulnerable to this because smart people can imagine every possible downside. They see the risks clearly. They anticipate loss. They visualize regret. And instead of using that intelligence to design protection, they freeze. They delay investing because fear needs certainty. They avoid checking finances because fear hates clarity. They keep money liquid just in case, while inflation eats it silently. Fear convinces you that inaction is safer than action. But financially, inaction is still a decision, just one that compounds against you. Here's the cruel irony. Fear pretends to protect you, but it quietly guarantees the outcome you're trying to avoid. You stay broke longer, you stay stressed longer, you stay stuck longer, because fear prefers familiar pain over unfamiliar growth. And smart people, who pride themselves on thinking ahead, often let fear masquerade as caution. But there's a difference. Caution builds systems. Fear avoids decisions. And your bank account can tell which one you're practicing. Chapter 4. Emotional spending is not about things. It's about relief. Most people don't spend money because they want things. They spend because they want relief. Relief from stress. Relief from boredom. Relief from insecurity. Relief from feeling behind. Buying something feels like control. It feels like progress. It feels like a win, even if it lasts minutes. And smart people are very good at justifying it. This will save me time. I deserve this. I'll make it back. It's an investment in myself. Those sentences aren't lies. They're emotional permissions. Your brain wants relief, and it uses logic to unlock it. That's why emotional spending doesn't feel reckless in the moment. It feels reasonable. But afterward, the relief fades, and the pattern remains. Smart people often think emotional spending means luxury purchases. It doesn't. It shows up as over-ordering convenience to avoid friction, upgrading lifestyle too early, subscriptions you never reassess, tools you buy instead of building skill, small leaks that never feel serious individually. These are not money problems. They are emotional regulation problems. Because Every dollar spent emotionally is a dollar not available structurally, and structure is what creates peace. Chapter 5. Why motivation will never fix this. Here's the mistake nearly everyone makes. They try to fix emotional money behavior with motivation. They say, I'll be more disciplined. I'll control myself. I'll try harder next month. But motivation is emotional fuel, and emotions are the problem. You cannot use emotion to override emotion consistently. That's like trying to put out fire with fire. Motivation spikes, then fades. Stress rises, then spending follows. Discipline works only when emotions are quiet, but money decisions are made when emotions are activated. That's why motivation always loses eventually. The solution is not to become stronger emotionally. The solution is to stop letting emotions access the controls. This is where systems come in. Systems don't care how you feel. They don't negotiate. They don't get tired. They quietly enforce decisions you made when you were calm. And calm decisions always beat emotional ones. In the next chapter, we'll break down why smart people resist systems more than anyone, and how that resistance keeps them broke even when they know better. Because intelligence, unchecked, can become its own trap. Dear viewers, write which city you're from. It's interesting to see which corners of the world are watching our videos. Chapter 6. Why smart people resist systems and pay the price. Smart people love flexibility. They want options. They want control. They want the ability to adjust, optimize, and intervene whenever necessary. And that's exactly why systems make them uncomfortable. A system feels restrictive. It feels rigid. It feels like giving up control. So smart people tell themselves a story. I don't need a system. I understand my finances. I can adjust manually. I like staying hands-on. What they don't realize is this: manual control is emotional control, and emotions are unreliable operators. The smartest people often trust themselves too much in the moment and underestimate how different they become under stress, fatigue, pressure, or excitement. You are not the same person on payday as you are on a stressful Tuesday night. You are not the same person after a win as you are after a loss. Systems are not about limiting intelligence. They are about protecting intelligence from emotional sabotage. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If your money decisions require you to be calm, focused, and rational every time, your plan is fragile. Life will break it. Systems assume you will not always be at your best. And that's not pessimism. That's realism. The smartest financial behavior is not built on self-trust. It's built on self-knowledge. Chapter 7. Mood-based money. Decisions and the illusion of control. Most people don't realize how much their mood controls their wallet. Good mood? Spend more. Take risks. Upgrade. Bad mood? Avoid decisions. Delay payments. Ignore numbers. Anxious mood? Hoard cash. Cancel plans. Freeze progress. Excited mood? Overcommit. Overspend. Overestimate future income. You think you're making rational choices, but your mood is setting the boundaries. Smart people are especially vulnerable here because they can explain every mood-based decision. They don't say, I felt anxious. They say, the timing didn't feel right. They don't say, I was excited. They say, the opportunity made sense. Language hides emotion, but the behavior reveals it. This is why tracking expenses alone doesn't fix anything, because the problem isn't numbers, it's patterns. Patterns tied to emotional states. Until you see that, you'll keep trying to fix money with math. while emotion runs the show. Chapter 8. The Ego Trap. When being smart becomes expensive, there is a specific trap smart people fall into. Ego-based decision-making, not arrogance, subtle ego. The ego that says, I should be able to handle this, I don't need guardrails, I'm better than average. That ego resists automation. It resists separation. It resists rules that feel beneath intelligence. But money doesn't care how smart you are. Money responds to consistency, and ego hates consistency because consistency feels boring. Smart people like novelty. They like improvement. They like tweaking. And tweaking is where emotion sneaks back in. The wealthiest people are not the smartest in the room. They are the ones who got bored earliest. Bored of checking, bored of adjusting, bored of reacting. So they built systems that run without them. And then they moved on with their lives. Chapter 9. Emotional pain is the real currency. Your spending, every emotional money decision is paid for twice, once with money, once with peace. You don't just lose dollars, you lose calm. You lose confidence. You lose trust in yourself. That loss accumulates. You start avoiding your finances not because they're bad, but because they trigger shame. And shame is paralyzing. Smart people feel this deeply because they know they should be doing better. That internal judgment creates pressure. Pressure creates emotional behavior, and the loop continues. This is why the real goal is not wealth. It's emotional neutrality around money. When money stops triggering shame, fear, or excitement, clarity returns. And clarity makes better decisions inevitable. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about the most dangerous emotion of all when it comes to money. Not fear, not greed, but something far more socially acceptable and far more destructive. Dear friend, you are definitely on the right track if you are watching this video. Like, subscribe, and write in the comments which topic or problem concerns you the most. We promise to prepare a professional video explanation at your request. Chapter 10. Comfort, the emotion that keeps you poor the longest. Fear makes you freeze. Greed makes you gamble. But comfort? Comfort keeps you broke politely. Comfort is socially acceptable. Comfort doesn't look reckless. Comfort doesn't raise alarms. Comfort says, at least I'm okay right now. At least this isn't painful. At least I'm not struggling like them. Comfort is the emotion that convinces smart people to stop early. They're not desperate enough to change, not uncomfortable enough to redesign, not stressed enough to confront the deeper problem. So they coast. They earn enough to survive. They manage enough to get by. They understand enough to sound informed. But nothing compounds, because growth requires temporary discomfort, and comfort resists that with quiet persistence. Comfort is why people stay in jobs they intellectually know they've outgrown. Comfort is why they delay restructuring finances that mostly work. Comfort is why they tolerate small leaks instead of redesigning the system. And smart people are especially vulnerable here, because comfort can be rationalized. This isn't so bad. I'll fix it later. I'm still better than average. But average is not freedom, and comfort has a cost you don't feel immediately. It costs momentum. It costs optionality. It costs future calm. Chapter 11. Emotional avoidance, when intelligence turns into delay. Smart people are good at one dangerous thing: avoiding discomfort intelligently. They don't avoid obviously. They avoid strategically. They research instead of deciding. They plan instead of acting. They refine instead of committing. They stay busy without moving forward. This is emotional avoidance disguised as preparation. Money decisions trigger anxiety because they involve permanence. Once you automate something, you can't undo it emotionally. Once you commit, uncertainty becomes real. So smart people delay, not because they don't know what to do, but because commitment removes escape routes. Avoidance feels safe, but avoidance is expensive because while you wait for clarity, time keeps charging interest. This is why emotional discipline matters more than financial intelligence. You don't need better ideas. You need the ability to sit inside discomfort without reacting or escaping. That skill alone separates people who build wealth from people who understand it conceptually. Chapter 12. Comparison, the emotional tax. You never see on statements. Comparison is the silent thief of clarity. You don't compare because you're insecure. You compare because your brain seeks reference points. But comparison distorts decision-making. You start spending to match appearances. Saving feels pointless when others seem ahead. Risk feels necessary when you feel behind. Comparison turns money into identity. And once money becomes identity, every decision becomes emotional. Smart people compare quietly. They don't say it out loud. They don't admit it, but they feel it. Social media amplifies this relentlessly. You see outcomes without context, success without timeline, spending without consequences. And your nervous system responds as if you're losing, even when you're not. This creates urgency. Urgency creates bad decisions, and bad decisions reinforce the feeling of being behind. This is why comparison is not motivational. It's corrosive. The only antidote is internal reference. Systems based on your values. Metrics based on your timeline. Progress measured against your past. Without that, emotion will always hijack logic. Chapter 13. Emotional money is loud. Rational money is quiet. Here's a simple distinction that changes everything. Emotional money feels urgent. Rational money feels boring. Emotional money demands attention. Rational money disappears. If your finances feel dramatic, something is wrong. Drama means emotion is involved. Emotion means reaction. Reaction means loss of control. The goal is not excitement. The goal is quiet. Quiet money systems don't trigger fear. They don't trigger pride. They don't trigger shame. They just work. Smart people often mistake quiet for stagnation. But quiet is what compounding sounds like. Nothing happens loudly when it's working. That's the lesson most people never learn. In the next chapter, we're going to reveal the exact mechanism that allows emotions to stop influencing money without relying on willpower, because willpower breaks, systems don't. Chapter 14. The moment you separate emotion from action. There is a moment, subtle, almost invisible, where everything begins to change. It's the moment you realize you don't have to act on every emotion. That sounds obvious, but most people live as if emotion equals instruction. If you feel anxious, you react. If you feel excited, you move. If you feel bored, you spend. If you feel behind, you rush. Emotion becomes the trigger, action becomes the reflex, and money becomes collateral damage. Smart people fall into this trap because they confuse awareness with control. They notice the emotion, but still obey it. Real control begins when emotion is observed, not followed. You don't need to suppress emotion. You don't need to eliminate it. You need to delay it from acting. That delay is where power lives, And money systems are designed to create that delay automatically. When money requires a pause, emotion loses momentum. When emotion loses momentum, logic regains authority. This is why automation works, not because it's efficient, but because it interrupts impulse. Chapter 15. Why willpower collapses under emotional load. Willpower is not a strategy. It's a finite resource. Every emotional decision drains it. Every stressful day weakens it. Every argument erodes it. Every poor night of sleep depletes it. And money decisions are often made at the worst possible time. Late at night, after long days, when emotions are raw, when judgment is compromised. Expecting willpower to win in those moments is unrealistic. That's why smart people fail consistently, not because they don't know better, but because they ask too much of themselves. The wealthy do the opposite. They assume willpower will fail, so they design systems that don't require it. They don't trust motivation. They don't trust moods. They don't trust discipline under stress. They trust structure, and structure is unemotional. Chapter 16. Emotional triggers that drain your bank account. Let's name them clearly, because once you name them, they lose secrecy. Stress spending, reward spending, revenge spending, status spending, boredom spending. Each one feels justified in the moment. Stress says, I need relief. Reward says, I earned this. Revenge says, I deserve better. Status says, I need to look successful. Boredom says, I need stimulation. None of these emotions care about your future. They care about now. And now is expensive. Smart people often don't see these as emotional triggers. They see them as personal choices. But if the same pattern repeats under the same emotional states, it's not a choice. It's conditioning. And conditioning requires interruption, not shame. Chapter 17. Why shame makes everything worse. Shame does not fix money behavior. It hides it. Shame makes you avoid statements, avoid conversations, avoid decisions. Avoidance compounds the problem. Smart people feel shame deeply because they expect more from themselves. I should know better. I shouldn't struggle with this. I'm smarter than this. That internal judgment becomes pressure. Pressure becomes emotional behavior. And the cycle tightens. Here's the truth you need to hear clearly. Shame is not a motivator. It is a silencer. Progress requires honesty, and honesty requires emotional safety. That's why reframing matters. You're not bad with money. You are emotionally human with money. And once you accept that, you can design around it. Chapter 18. The emotional system that protects money. Here's where everything starts to come together. You don't fix emotional money problems by thinking harder. You fix them by removing emotional access. Separate accounts, automatic transfers, pre-decided percentages, delayed spending rules, scheduled reviews. Each one reduces emotional interference. Each one creates distance between feeling and action. Distance is everything, because emotions move fast, but they fade quickly when not fed. The goal is not perfection. The goal is buffer, a buffer between impulse and outcome. And buffers change lives. In the next chapter, we'll talk about how identity locks people into emotional money behavior, and how changing identity is far more powerful than changing habits. Because habits fight emotion. Identity redirects it. If you appreciate our efforts and our thoughts, subscribe and like this video. We need to show the world that there are many people like us. We must always continue to improve. Chapter 19. Identity. The invisible hand behind every financial decision. You don't behave according to what you want. You behave according to who you believe you are. This is where most smart people never look. They try to change tactics. They try to change habits. They try to change strategies. But their identity stays the same. I'm just bad with money. I'm not disciplined. I'm impulsive. I always mess this up. Those sentences sound harmless. They're not. They are instructions. Your brain will always act in alignment with identity, even if it hurts you. If you see yourself as someone who struggles financially, your emotions will quietly sabotage any system you build. You'll override it. You'll adjust it. You'll abandon it under stress, not consciously, automatically, because consistency with identity feels safer than success that threatens it. This is why smart people relapse. They upgrade tools without upgrading self-image, and identity always wins. Chapter 20. Why self-talk is not motivation. It's programming. Every time you talk about money, you are programming your nervous system, not with logic, with meaning. When you say, "Money stresses me out. I hate dealing with finances. I'm just not wired for this." Your brain hears danger. Danger activates emotion. Emotion overrides logic. You can't calm your finances while constantly telling your brain that money is a threat. The wealthy speak differently, not positively, precisely. They don't say, "I'm good with money." They say, "Money is a system." Systems are neutral. Systems don't judge. Systems don't attack your identity. That language shift matters more than people realize, because once money is no longer personal, emotion loosens its grip. Chapter 21. Why discipline fails without emotional safety. Discipline requires safety. If your nervous system feels threatened, it will seek relief, not consistency. This is why financial discipline collapses during stress. Bills trigger fear. Markets trigger panic. Unexpected expenses trigger identity threats. Your body reacts first, then your brain explains later. You cannot discipline a threatened nervous system. You must stabilize it. That's why emotional regulation is not soft. It's structural. Sleep, predictability, buffers, reduced decision load. These are not luxuries. They are prerequisites. Smart people often dismiss this because it feels indirect. But indirect solutions are often the most durable ones. Chapter 22. Training the brain to pause instead of react. Here is the core skill that changes everything. The pause. Not hesitation, not avoidance. A conscious pause between emotion and action. This pause is trainable. And it starts with one question. What am I feeling right now? And what decision does this emotion want me to make? Once you name the emotion, you separate from it. And separation restores choice. You don't have to eliminate the feeling. You just stop letting it drive. This is how emotional intelligence turns into financial intelligence, not by suppressing feelings, but by slowing their influence. Chapter 23. Emotional maturity is the real financial edge. The most financially stable people are not the smartest. They are the most emotionally mature. They tolerate boredom. They tolerate uncertainty. They tolerate delayed gratification. They don't need constant stimulation. They don't need immediate validation. They don't need to prove progress daily. That emotional maturity allows money to compound quietly. Meanwhile, emotionally reactive people keep resetting the clock. They chase spikes. They chase excitement. They chase relief. And they wonder why nothing sticks. This is not a moral failure. It's a skill gap. And skills can be trained. The topic of this video was chosen by you. our viewers. In most of our videos, we remind you that you can write interesting topics you would like to hear about in the comments. We take the most interesting ones into consideration. Today's video topic was suggested by one of our viewers in the comments. John Doe, thank you for this theme. If you want us to cover a topic that interests you, write it in the comments. This will help us make videos on topics that are interesting to you, our viewers. Chapter 24. When emotion is managed, money obeys. Once emotion is regulated, money becomes simple. Not easy, simple. You stop fighting yourself. You stop sabotaging plans. You stop renegotiating decisions emotionally. Money becomes procedural, predictable, boring, reliable, and boring money builds free lives. In the next chapter, the final chapter of this message, we're going to bring everything together into a single operating principle. One sentence that, if remembered, will protect you from emotional money mistakes for the rest of your life. Chapter 25, the one sentence that separates emotion from money. Here it is, the sentence that ends most financial self-sabotage when it's remembered at the right moment. I do not make permanent decisions in temporary emotional states. That's it. That sentence alone would have saved you years. Years of impulse spending, years of delayed investing, years of avoidance, years of regret. Because emotions are temporary, but money decisions echo. Smart people forget this because emotions feel convincing. Fear feels urgent. Excitement feels justified. Comfort feels reasonable. But feelings are weather. Money decisions are architecture. You don't redesign a building because it's raining. You don't tear down a system because today feels uncomfortable. You wait. And waiting is not weakness. Waiting is intelligence applied emotionally. Chapter 26. Why timing is the most emotional lie in finance. I'll do it when the timing feels right. That sentence has ruined more financial futures than ignorance ever has. Because timing is rarely about logic. It's about emotional readiness. And emotional readiness is unreliable. The brain wants certainty before commitment. Money requires commitment before certainty. This mismatch traps smart people. They wait for confidence. They wait for clarity. They wait for conditions that feel safe. Meanwhile, time moves forward. Markets move. Opportunities compound. Costs rise. And waiting quietly becomes a decision. Just one you didn't consciously choose. The wealthy understand something critical. They don't wait until they feel ready. They act when the structure is ready. Structure over emotion, rules over moods, design over timing. That's the shift. Chapter 27. Emotional certainty versus structural safety. Most people want emotional certainty. They want to feel good before acting. They want to feel calm before committing. They want to feel confident before deciding. But emotional certainty is rare and fleeting. Structural safety is durable. Structural safety looks like emergency buffers, automatic contributions, clear boundaries, defined risk limits, predictable cash flow. When structure exists, emotion becomes irrelevant. You don't need to feel brave to invest. You don't need to feel motivated to save. You don't need to feel disciplined to spend wisely. The system handles it, and that's the goal. Not emotional mastery, structural protection. Chapter 28. Why emotional control is not suppression. Let's clear something up. Emotional control is not emotional suppression. Suppression ignores feelings. Control contains them. You still feel fear. You still feel desire. You still feel pressure. You just don't let those feelings touch the steering wheel. You acknowledge them, and then you check the system. Is this within the plan? Is this already accounted for? Is this a feeling or a fact? That pause is everything, and it can be trained, not overnight, but permanently. Chapter 29. The Cost of Emotional Whiplash. Emotional money creates whiplash. You save intensely, then splurge emotionally. You invest confidently, then panic at volatility. You commit to a plan, then abandon it when discomfort hits. This constant switching destroys momentum, and momentum is what creates wealth. Smart people don't lack knowledge. They lack emotional consistency. And consistency only comes from removing emotional decision points. This is why simplification matters. Fewer choices, fewer decisions, fewer moments where emotion can interfere. Less thinking, more alignment. Chapter 30. When money stops being personal. This is the turning point. The moment money stops being about you, not your worth, not your intelligence, not your success, just inputs and outputs, just flow. When money becomes impersonal, emotion relaxes. You no longer defend decisions. You no longer personalize mistakes. You no longer feel attacked by numbers. You adjust calmly. And calm adjustment beats emotional reaction every time. In the next message, we're going to go deeper into how long-term emotional patterns are formed around money and how to rewire them without force. Because once the brain is retrained, money stops triggering the old reactions entirely. Chapter 31. How emotional money patterns are formed. No one is born bad with money. They are trained through early experiences, trained through stress, trained through watching adults react emotionally to finances, trained through scarcity, unpredictability, or shame. Your brain learned patterns long before you understood money. Patterns like money equals danger, money equals power, money equals safety, money equals stress. Once a pattern forms, the brain stops questioning it. It reacts automatically. That's why emotional money decisions feel instinctive. They're not conscious choices. They're conditioned responses. And smart people often underestimate conditioning because it feels irrational. But conditioning doesn't care about intelligence. It cares about repetition. Chapter 32. Why awareness alone doesn't break patterns. Many people reach a painful realization. I know exactly why I do this, and I still do it. That awareness feels frustrating, but it's normal. Because awareness doesn't erase conditioning. It creates space, and space must be filled with a new response. If you don't replace an emotional pattern with a structured alternative, the brain defaults to what it knows. This is why insight alone doesn't create change. Change requires repetition of a new behavior, even when emotion is present. That's how rewiring happens. Not through understanding, through practice. Chapter 33. Rewiring money reactions without force. Here's the secret most people miss. You don't rewire emotional responses by fighting them. You rewire them by outlasting them. Emotions spike, then fade. If you don't act during the spike, your brain learns something new. I can feel this and nothing bad happens. That learning is powerful. Each time you delay spending, each time you don't panic sell, each time you don't avoid the numbers, your nervous system updates. Money stops feeling like a threat, not immediately, but permanently. Chapter 34. The 24-hour rule. That reprograms impulse. One simple practice can change everything. Delay, not denial. Delay. When an emotional urge appears, to spend, react, adjust, abandon, you wait 24 hours. Not to punish yourself, to let emotion decay. Most urges don't survive a day, and when they don't, your brain learns restraint without trauma. Smart people resist this because they want to act now. But delay is not passivity, it's training. Each delay strengthens emotional authority. Chapter 35. Emotional investing versus strategic investing. Emotional investing chases feelings. Fear sells low. Excitement buys high. Regret reshuffles portfolios. Strategic investing ignores mood. It follows rules. It respects time. It assumes volatility. Smart people know this intellectually, but knowing doesn't stop emotion. Structure does. Rules like fixed contribution schedules, predefined risk limits, long-term horizons, automated rebalancing. These rules keep emotion out because emotion cannot negotiate with automation. Chapter 36. The illusion of I'll be better. Next time. Next time is a fantasy. Emotion doesn't improve with intention. It improves with constraints. If you rely on future discipline, you are betting against biology. The wealthy don't wait to be better. They make it harder to be worse. They design friction. They remove access. They eliminate temptation. And then they forget about it. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Chapter 37. Emotional resilience is financial resilience. The strongest financial skill is not budgeting. It's emotional recovery. How quickly do you stabilize after fear? How calmly do you respond to loss? How well do you resist urgency? Resilient people don't overcorrect. They don't spiral. They don't abandon plans. They absorb shock. And shock absorption is built before impact. Buffers, margins, redundancy. This is emotional insurance. Chapter 38. When emotions lose their grip, there will be a moment, quiet, understated, when money no longer triggers you the way it used to. You'll notice fear without panic, desire without impulse, pressure without collapse. That's when you know rewiring is happening. Emotion doesn't disappear. It just stops controlling behavior, and behavior is where outcomes live. In the next message, we'll talk about how emotional intelligence compounds over time, and why people who master emotion eventually outperform those who rely only on logic. Because money obeys those who remain steady longest. Chapter 39. Why emotional control compounds faster than intelligence. Intelligence gives you options. Emotional control gives you consistency. And consistency is what compounds. Most people believe success comes from making brilliant decisions. In reality, it comes from avoiding terrible ones repeatedly. Emotion causes terrible decisions. Panic at the wrong moment. Overconfidence at the peak. Avoidance when action is required. Smart people make fewer ignorant mistakes, but they still make emotional ones. Emotion doesn't care how much you know. It only cares how you feel right now. That's why emotionally steady people quietly outperform reactive geniuses over long periods. They don't spike as high, but they don't crash either. And wealth is built in the space between extremes. Chapter 40. Why markets punish emotion ruthlessly. Markets don't reward intelligence. They reward patience. They don't care about your reasoning. They don't care about your confidence. They don't care about your explanations. They respond to behavior, and emotional behavior is predictable. Fear sells low. Greed buys high. Comfort holds too long. Ego overtrades. Markets don't punish mistakes once. They punish patterns. That's why emotionally reactive people feel unlucky. They're not unlucky. They're consistent in the wrong direction. And smart people are often shocked by this. They assume insight will protect them, but insight without emotional discipline is exposed. Chapter 41. The boredom advantage. Here is a secret no one wants to accept. Bored people win financially, not apathetic people, not disengaged people. Bored systems, the kind of systems where nothing exciting happens, nothing dramatic changes, nothing feels urgent, just steady input, steady process, steady output. Smart people struggle with this because boredom feels like stagnation. But boredom is the sound of compounding working. Emotionally mature people tolerate boredom. Emotionally reactive people chase stimulation, and stimulation is expensive. Chapter 42. Emotional intelligence creates optionality. When you are emotionally regulated, something powerful happens. You gain options. You don't need to act immediately. You don't need to force outcomes. You don't need to accept bad terms, because urgency is gone. And urgency is what traps people. When money decisions are emotional, everything feels time-sensitive. When emotions are managed, you can wait. And the ability to wait is leverage. Chapter 43. The cost of being right. Emotionally smart people like being right. Emotionally. They want their feelings validated. I knew this would happen. I should have trusted my gut. I felt this was risky. Being emotionally right feels good, but it's expensive, because feelings don't predict outcomes. They predict states. And reacting to feelings reinforces the belief that emotion is guidance. It's not. It's feedback. Feedback must be processed, not obeyed. The wealthiest people don't need to be right emotionally. They need to be consistent structurally. Chapter 44. How calm becomes a competitive advantage. Calm is underrated. It doesn't advertise itself. It doesn't impress quickly. It doesn't dominate conversations. But calm outlasts chaos. In volatile environments, calm people make fewer mistakes, recover faster, stick to plans, protect capital. Smart people often confuse intensity with competence, but intensity burns out. Calm endures, and endurance wins. Chapter 45. Emotional clarity ends the need for prediction. Most people try to predict the future because they don't trust themselves emotionally. They want certainty because uncertainty scares them. But when you are emotionally regulated, you don't need prediction. You need preparation. You don't ask, what will happen? You ask, what will I do if it happens? That shift removes fear, because now no outcome feels fatal. Chapter 46. When money stops feeling like a test. For many smart people, money feels like a test of worth. Am I doing enough? Am I smart enough? Am I behind? That framing creates pressure. Pressure creates emotion. Emotion creates mistakes. When money stops being a test, performance improves. You stop proving. You start executing. You stop reacting. You start responding. And responding is always superior. Chapter 47. Emotional freedom is financial freedom. This is the truth hidden behind every wealth story. Money freedom comes after emotional freedom, not before. Because without emotional freedom, money amplifies instability. With emotional freedom, even modest income creates calm. That's why some high earners are miserable, and some moderate earners feel rich. The difference is emotional regulation. In the next message, we're going to step into the final phase, how to maintain emotional mastery over time, even when life hits hard, even when money is under pressure, because mastery isn't about perfect behavior. It's about recovery. Chapter 48. The difference between emotional collapse and emotional recovery. Everyone breaks sometimes, even disciplined people, even calm people, even those who have it together. The difference is not whether emotion appears. It's how fast you recover after it does. Emotionally reactive people spiral. One bad decision becomes 10. One setback becomes identity. One mistake becomes proof. Emotionally mature people interrupt the spiral early. They don't shame themselves. They don't overcorrect. They don't abandon the system. They stabilize first, because recovery speed matters more than perfection, and recovery speed is a trained skill. Chapter 49, Why Overcorrection is Just Another Emotional Reaction. After a financial mistake, many smart people swing hard. They restrict aggressively. They change strategies overnight. They punish themselves with extreme rules. This feels disciplined. It's not. It's guilt reacting. Overcorrection creates instability, and instability invites more emotion. The goal after a mistake is not intensity, it's recentering. You return to baseline, you review calmly, you adjust minimally. Small corrections preserve momentum. Big emotional swings destroy it. Chapter 50, Emotional Maintenance, the part no one talks about. Emotional mastery is not achieved once. It's maintained. Just like physical health. You don't exercise once and stay fit forever. You don't eat well for a month and never think about food again. Money works the same way emotionally. You maintain sleep, stress levels, predictability, decision load, input quality. Because emotional instability doesn't come from money alone. It comes from life pressure, and life pressure leaks into finances if you're not careful. Smart people often ignore this. They optimize money, but neglect their nervous system, and the nervous system always collects its debt. Chapter 51, When Life Hits Hard and Money is Tested. There will be moments when logic is not enough. Loss, illness, uncertainty, sudden change. In these moments, emotion surges. This is where systems show their value. You don't need to think clearly. You don't need to be strong. The system holds. Bills get paid. Savings continue. Structure remains. And that stability becomes emotional support. This is the deepest benefit of emotional financial design. Money stops adding stress when life already has enough. Chapter 52, The Power of Knowing You Won't Ruin Yourself. One of the greatest sources of anxiety is self-distrust. Will I mess this up? Will I panic? Will I undo everything? Emotionally mature people trust their systems, not their moods. They know that even on bad days, damage is limited. That knowledge relaxes the nervous system. And a relaxed nervous system makes better decisions. It's a loop, but a positive one. Chapter 53, Emotional Regulation is Quiet Leadership. If you ever lead others, at work, in family, in life, your emotional state matters more than your words. Calm creates safety. Safety creates trust. Trust creates cooperation. Financial calm spills outward. You become less reactive, less defensive, more deliberate. Money was just the training ground. The skill applies everywhere. Chapter 54, Why Drama Feels Productive. And isn't drama feels like movement? It feels like engagement. It feels like urgency. It feels like importance. But drama consumes energy without creating progress. Emotionally reactive people live in cycles of drama. Emotionally regulated people live in cycles of execution. They don't need intensity to feel alive. They need alignment. And alignment is quiet. Chapter 55, When Emotional Mastery Becomes Identity. Eventually, something shifts. You don't manage emotions anymore. You are someone who doesn't react impulsively. This becomes identity, and identity makes discipline effortless. You don't need reminders. You don't need motivation. You don't need constant vigilance. Your default is calm. And calm people make money boring. Boring money builds strong lives. Chapter 56, The Hidden Freedom of Not Needing to Feel Certain. Emotionally reactive people crave certainty. They want guarantees. They want clarity before action. They want reassurance. Emotionally mature people don't. They can act under uncertainty. They don't need to feel good first. They trust the system to absorb shock. This flexibility is powerful because certainty is rare, but resilience is buildable. Chapter 57, The Final Emotional Trap, Pride. There is one last emotional trap that catches smart people, pride. I've come too far to adjust. I should have known better. I don't want to admit this isn't working. Pride freezes systems, and frozen systems decay. Emotionally mature people adjust without shame. Yeah, they don't protect ego. They protect function. And function always wins long term. Chapter 58, When Money Finally Listens. At some point, money stops feeling like a fight. You're not forcing it. You're not chasing it. You're not reacting to it. It moves predictably because emotion stopped interfering. That's when people say things like, money feels lighter. I don't stress like I used to. I don't think about it all the time. That's not magic. That's emotional discipline applied structurally. In the next message, we'll enter the final stretch, bringing everything together into a clear, grounded framework you can carry forward for life. Because understanding emotion is not the end. Integration is. Chapter 59, Integration. When knowledge becomes behavior. There is a moment in every real transformation when learning stops feeling like effort. Not because you stopped growing, but because the ideas have moved from your head into your nervous system. This is integration. You no longer remind yourself not to react. You simply don't. You no longer fight impulses. They dissolve faster. You no longer rehearse discipline. Your default behavior is disciplined. This is where smart people finally pull ahead. Not because they learned more, but because they stopped overriding themselves emotionally. Integration is slow, and that's why it lasts. Chapter 60, Why Emotional Intelligence Must Precede Financial Strategy. Most financial education starts in the wrong place. It starts with tools, accounts, strategies, optimization. But tools don't control behavior, emotion does. That's why two people can use the same strategy and get completely different results. One reacts emotionally, the other doesn't. The strategy didn't fail. The emotional context did. This is why emotional intelligence is not optional. It is the foundation. Once the foundation is stable, strategy finally works the way it's supposed to. Chapter 61, The Emotional Rules That Actually Work. Let's make this concrete. Here are the rules that emotionally stable people follow, often without naming them. They don't make money decisions when tired. They don't change plans when anxious. They don't celebrate with spending. They don't punish themselves financially. They don't confuse feelings with facts. These rules are not strict. They are protective. They exist to preserve clarity. And clarity is the rarest asset in modern life. Chapter 62, When Your Brain Stops Treating Money as a Threat. At some point, money stops activating your fight or flight response. Your heart rate doesn't spike. Your thoughts don't race. Your chest doesn't tighten. Numbers become neutral. This doesn't happen because you got rich. It happens because your brain learned safety. Safety through predictability, safety through buffers, safety through repetition. Once safety exists, emotion relaxes, and relaxed brains make better decisions. Chapter 63, Emotional Mastery, changes how you see opportunity. Opportunities feel different now. They no longer feel urgent. They no longer feel rare. They no longer feel like salvation. They feel optional. You can evaluate them calmly. You can walk away without regret. You can say yes without panic. That's power. Not because you dominate outcomes, but because you don't need them to feel okay. Chapter 64, Why Calm People Look Lucky. People will start saying things like, "You're lucky." "You always seem to make the right moves." Things just work out for you. They won't see the emotional discipline behind it. They won't see the pauses, the delays, the non-reactions, the moments where you did nothing. Luck is often just emotional steadiness over time, and emotional steadiness is trainable. Chapter 65, The End of Emotional Negotiation. Emotionally reactive people negotiate with themselves constantly. "Just this once. I'll fix it later. I deserve this." Emotionally mature people don't negotiate. They already decided. The decision was made when calm, and calm decisions are enforced later. Even under pressure, this removes inner conflict, and inner conflict is exhausting. Chapter 66, Emotional Freedom Creates Financial Simplicity. As emotions settle, money simplifies. You need fewer accounts, fewer rules, fewer tools. Complexity was compensating for emotional instability. Once stability exists, simplicity works. This is why advanced systems often look basic. They're not basic. They're clean. Chapter 67, When Money Stops Being the Teacher. For a long time, money was your teacher. It showed you fear. It revealed avoidance. It exposed impatience. Now, the lesson is complete. The skill transfers. You regulate emotion in conversations, in conflict, in uncertainty, in decision-making beyond money. Money trained you for life. Chapter 68, The Quiet Confidence of Emotional Control. This confidence is not loud. It doesn't argue. It doesn't posture. It doesn't rush. It waits. And waiting is uncomfortable for people who are still reactive. That's okay. You're no longer playing the same game. Chapter 69, Emotional Intelligence Outlasts. Any markets change. Economies shift. Rules evolve. Emotional intelligence doesn't expire. It adapts. That's why emotionally mature people survive cycles that destroy others. Not because they predicted correctly, but because they didn't self-destruct. Chapter 70, The Turning Point. You can feel there will be a moment, subtle, ordinary, when you realize you didn't react. Something that used to trigger you didn't. You paused. You checked the system. You moved on. That's the moment everything changed. In the next message, we'll move into the final chapters, where emotional mastery becomes a lifelong orientation, not a phase. Because this isn't something you finish, it's something you become. Chapter 71, When Emotional Mastery Becomes Orientation. There is a subtle shift that happens when this work is truly done. You stop using techniques. You stop reminding yourself to pause. You stop rehearsing frameworks. You stop checking yourself constantly, not because you became careless, but because emotional regulation became your orientation. Orientation is different from effort. Effort is something you apply. Orientation is how you naturally face the world. Money no longer pulls you forward or pushes you back. It sits where it belongs. And when money stays in its place, your mind stops circling it. This is the stage most people never reach because they quit too early. They want results before regulation, but regulation is the result. Chapter 72, Why Smart People Mistake Emotional Mastery for Apathy. From the outside, emotional mastery can look like indifference. You don't rush. You don't react. You don't get visibly excited or panicked. People may assume you don't care. You do. You care deeply, but you don't bleed care into behavior. You've learned that intensity is not the same as commitment. You've learned that calm action outperforms emotional action over time. That lesson alone puts you in a different category of person. Chapter 73, The Death of Financial Drama. Financial drama is addictive. High highs, low lows, wins and losses that feel personal. Drama makes life feel meaningful until it exhausts you. Emotionally mature people exit the drama loop, not because they're boring, because they're finished with chaos. They choose steadiness over stimulation, and steadiness creates something drama never can. Trust. Trust in systems. Trust in self. Trust in time. Chapter 74, Emotional energy is the real scarcity. Money is renewable. Time is limited. But emotional energy? That's the real bottleneck. Emotionally reactive people burn it constantly. On worry, on regret, on anticipation, on rumination. Emotionally regulated people conserve it. They don't spend emotional energy unless it matters. This is why they appear grounded even under pressure. They're not stronger. They're more selective. Chapter 75, Why Emotional Discipline Feels Like Freedom. Discipline sounds restrictive, but emotional discipline is liberating. It frees you from impulse. It frees you from regret. It frees you from internal conflict. You're no longer fighting yourself. You're no longer negotiating. You're aligned. And alignment feels like peace, not passive peace, active peace, the kind that lets you move forward without friction. Chapter 76, When Money Stops Being a Signal. For most people, money is a signal. More money means success. Less money means failure. That signal creates emotional spikes. Emotionally mature people stop reading money as a signal. They read it as data. Data does not judge. Data does not threaten. Data does not define identity. It informs adjustment. Once money becomes data, emotion steps back, and clarity steps forward. Chapter 77, Emotional Authority is quiet authority. You no longer need to convince yourself. You no longer need to argue internally. Your decisions don't require emotional validation. They're grounded. This creates a quiet authority that extends beyond money. People feel it. They trust your judgment. They sense your steadiness. They lean on your calm, not because you're louder, but because you're not. Chapter 78, The End of Self-Sabotage Cycles. Self-sabotage requires emotion plus opportunity. You removed opportunity through systems, through automation, through rules made in calm moments. Now emotion can arise, but it has nowhere to act. This is how cycles end, not with force, with design. Chapter 79, Why Emotional Control is the Ultimate Leverage. Leverage is often misunderstood. It's not power over others. It's power over reaction. When you don't react impulsively, you see more. When you see more, you choose better. When you choose better, results follow naturally. Emotionally reactive people chase leverage externally. Emotionally mature people are leverage. Chapter 80, The Moment You Stop Trying to Fix Yourself. This may be the most important moment of all, when you stop seeing yourself as broken. You weren't weak. You weren't flawed. You weren't incapable. You were untrained emotionally in a world that never taught this skill. Once you see that, shame dissolves. And without shame, growth accelerates. In the next message, we'll close this journey properly, not by pushing you forward, but by anchoring what you've already built. Because emotional mastery isn't something you chase. It's something you stand on. Chapter 81, Standing on Emotional Ground instead of chasing stability. Most people chase stability as if it's somewhere ahead of them. A number, a milestone, a future moment where anxiety finally disappears. But stability doesn't arrive from the outside. It's built internally through emotional grounding. When your emotions are regulated, stability becomes portable. You carry it with you. Markets move, you stay steady. Income fluctuates, you adjust calmly. Unexpected expenses appear, you respond without panic. This is why emotionally mature people don't fear volatility. They don't mistake movement for danger. They understand that instability is external, panic is internal, and panic is optional. Chapter 82, Why Emotional Strength Looks Boring from the Outside. People expect strength to look intense, driven, obsessive, hyper-focused. But emotional strength looks quiet. It looks like not checking constantly, not reacting immediately, not escalating small problems. It looks like patience. And patience confuses people who live in urgency. They may think you don't care. You do. You just don't outsource your nervous system to every signal. Chapter 83, The Emotional Cost of Staying Informed. There's a subtle emotional drain most people ignore. Constant exposure, news, market commentary, opinions, predictions. Staying informed sounds responsible, but information without action paths creates anxiety. Emotionally mature people curate input carefully. They don't consume what they can't use. They don't track what they can't influence. They protect emotional bandwidth the same way they protect money, because anxiety compounds faster than interest. Chapter 84, When Calm Becomes Self-Reinforcing. Something powerful happens once calm becomes familiar. Your body starts preferring it. Drama feels exhausting. Urgency feels artificial. Emotional spikes feel disruptive. This preference reinforces good decisions automatically. You don't need rules to avoid panic spending. Panic simply feels unpleasant now. That's how mastery embeds. When bad behavior feels uncomfortable and good behavior feels natural. Chapter 85, Emotional Integrity and Financial Integrity. Integrity is alignment between values and behavior. Emotional integrity means your feelings don't contradict your long-term goals. You may feel fear, but you don't betray your plan. You may feel desire, but you don't abandon your boundaries. This consistency builds self-trust, and self-trust is one of the most stabilizing forces in life. When you trust yourself, you stop seeking reassurance. When you stop seeking reassurance, emotion quiets. Chapter 86, Why Emotionally Regulated People Feel Ahead. They're not ahead financially. They're ahead emotionally. They don't carry regret from yesterday. They don't borrow stress from tomorrow. They live where they are. That presence creates clarity, and clarity accelerates progress, because you stop wasting energy correcting emotional mistakes. Chapter 87, Emotional Authority Changes Relationships. 2. This work doesn't stay in the financial lane, it spreads. You listen better, you argue less, you choose words more carefully, because emotional regulation isn't selective. Once learned, it applies everywhere. Money was just the training ground. Chapter 88, the end of the inner tug of war. Most people live with internal conflict. Part of them wants safety. Part of them wants pleasure. Part of them wants progress. Emotion pulls in all directions. Emotionally mature people resolve this conflict structurally. Safety is handled. Pleasure is bounded. Progress is scheduled. No part needs to fight for control. That internal peace is priceless. Chapter 89. Why emotional mastery is rare and valuable. This skill isn't common because it's not flashy. It doesn't produce viral moments. It doesn't impress quickly. It doesn't promise instant results. But it quietly protects lives. Over decades, emotionally mature people rarely self-destruct. They don't implode under pressure. They don't sabotage momentum. They don't trade long-term peace for short-term relief. That's why they last. Chapter 90. The shift from reaction to orientation. This is the shift you've made. You no longer live in reaction. You live in orientation. You face life calmly. You assess before acting. You design before deciding. Money no longer tests you. It reflects you. In the next message, we'll begin the final chapters, where emotional mastery becomes legacy, where your relationship with money stabilizes permanently, and where the real reason smart people stay broke is finally reversed. Because intelligence didn't fail you. Emotion just needed structure. Chapter 91. Emotional Mastery as Legacy. At some point, this stops being about you, not because you disappear, but because what you've stabilized begins to affect others. Children feel it. Partners sense it. Teams benefit from it. They don't hear speeches about money. They experience consistency. They experience someone who doesn't panic, someone who doesn't escalate stress, someone who doesn't make emotion everyone else's problem. That is legacy, not numbers passed down, but nervous systems that learn safety by proximity. Chapter 92. Why emotionally regulated people change rooms. Every environment has an emotional temperature. Some rooms are anxious, some are competitive, some are chaotic. Emotionally reactive people adapt to the room. Emotionally mature people change the room. Their calm lowers volume. Their steadiness slows pace. Their presence creates space. This isn't charisma, it's regulation, and it's rare. Chapter 93. When money stops being the villain. For many people, money is the villain of their story. It's the reason they're stressed, the reason they argue, the reason they feel behind. Emotionally mature people rewrite the story. Money becomes neutral, not good, not bad, just a tool that behaves according to structure. Once money stops being blamed, responsibility returns without shame. And responsibility, handled calmly, is empowering. Chapter 94. Emotional intelligence makes strategy optional. Here's the irony. Once emotional intelligence is high, strategy becomes less critical, not irrelevant, but forgiving. You can recover from suboptimal choices. You can adjust without panic. You can survive mistakes without spirals. Emotionally reactive people need perfect strategy to survive. Emotionally mature people don't, because they don't self-destruct when things go wrong. Chapter 95. Why peace used to feel suspicious, like you weren't doing enough, like something was being ignored, like progress required discomfort. Now you know better. Peace is not the absence of effort. It's effort without internal resistance, and effort without resistance goes far. In the next message, we'll move closer to the true ending, where this emotional mastery is locked in, where reflection replaces striving, and where you're invited to decide how this clarity will shape the next chapter of your life. Because mastery doesn't ask you to do more. It asks you to choose deliberately. Chapter 109, When Effort Becomes Directional. There was a time when effort felt scattered. You tried hard, but in too many directions. Emotion pulled you toward urgency. Comparison pulled you toward noise. Fear pulled you toward safety at the wrong moments. Now, effort feels different. It has direction. You don't work harder. You work cleaner. Your energy is no longer wasted correcting emotional mistakes. It's no longer drained by second guessing. It's no longer diluted by reactive decisions. Direction turns effort into momentum, and momentum is quiet power. Chapter 110, The Disappearance of Financial Whiplash. Emotional money creates whiplash. 1 month feels optimistic. The next feels panicked. Plans are rewritten. Rules are broken. Confidence swings. That whiplash disappears when emotion is regulated. You don't swing between extremes anymore. You don't oscillate between overconfidence and fear. Your financial life develops rhythm, and rhythm stabilizes identity. When life has rhythm, you stop bracing for impact. Chapter 111, Why You No Longer Romanticize. Struggle. Struggle once felt meaningful. It felt like proof of effort, proof of ambition, proof that you were trying. Now you see it clearly. Unnecessary struggle is not noble. It's inefficient. Emotionally mature people don't glorify stress. They design it out. They don't need pain to feel valid. They don't need chaos to feel alive. They need progress that doesn't destroy them. Chapter 112, Emotional Discipline as Self-Respect. There is a form of self-respect that has nothing to do with confidence. It's consistency, keeping promises to yourself, not betraying long-term goals for short-term relief, not abandoning structure when feelings fluctuate. That consistency builds quiet dignity. You trust yourself because you don't abandon yourself, and that trust changes everything. Chapter 113, Why You Don't Argue with Yourself Anymore. Internal arguments are exhausting. Should I? Shouldn't I? What if? What about? Those arguments disappear when decisions are pre-made. Emotionally mature people decide before emotion arrives. So when emotion shows up, there's nothing to debate. The system answers. This saves mental energy, which compounds into clarity. Chapter 114, Emotional Stillness Reveals True Desire. When emotion stops hijacking attention, something surprising happens. You can finally hear what you actually want, not what fear wants, not what comparison wants, not what comfort wants, what you want. Many people never reach this point. Their desires are always distorted by urgency or insecurity. You removed the distortion, and now desire feels calm, not desperate. That's how you know it's real. Chapter 115, The End of Financial Overthinking. Overthinking is emotion trying to regain control. It loops, it revisits, it questions settled decisions. That loop breaks when trust is established. Trust in systems, trust in process, trust in your ability to respond calmly. Emotionally mature people don't eliminate thought. They eliminate rumination. And rumination is what drains life force. Chapter 116, Why You Feel More Present. Now, presence returns when emotion stops projecting fear into the future and regret into the past. Money no longer pulls your mind forward or backward, so your attention stays where your body is. This is not mindfulness as a practice. It's mindfulness as a byproduct of regulation. You're present because nothing is screaming for attention anymore. Chapter 117, The Subtle Joy of Emotional Simplicity. Joy doesn't arrive as fireworks. It arrives as ease. Ease in decisions, ease in conversations, ease in daily routines. Emotionally regulated lives don't feel dramatic. They feel livable, and livable lives last. Chapter 118, When Stability Becomes Self-Reinforcing. Stability creates confidence. Confidence reduces emotional spikes. Reduced spikes preserve stability. This loop builds quietly, month by month, decision by decision. You are now inside that loop, and once inside, it's hard to fall out. Chapter 119, Why You're No Longer Afraid of Slowing Down. Slowing down used to feel dangerous, like you might miss something, like you might fall behind, like momentum would disappear. Now you know better. Momentum comes from consistency, not speed. Slowing down doesn't stop progress. It protects it. Chapter 120, Preparing for the Final Closure. We are nearing the end of this journey, not an ending of effort, but an ending of struggle. In the final messages, we will not add more techniques. We will seal what you've already built, so that this way of living remains stable, even when life changes, even when pressure returns, even when emotion rises again. Because mastery isn't about never feeling. It's about never losing yourself inside the feeling.